Do any of you know what time it is? Well, obviously, it's the college football off-season. This is the period where programs host camps, install new schemes, and more importantly, go all in on recruiting. And nowadays, recruiting is pretty straightforward. Whoever has the best NIL package usually wins. But pre-NIL brought out some of the craziest recruiting stories the sport has ever seen. So today, I found 5 odd recruiting stories throughout the years that showcased how crazy those times were. Now I imagine that most of you watching have been to the popular fast food chain Chick-fil-a. But what if I told you this restaurant swayed a recruit's decision to go to a different university? That recruit's name was Casanova McKenzie, a 4-star recruit out of Alabama in 2012. To set the stage, it was January 20th, 2012, where McKenzie took an official visit to Clemson University. The program was just turning around under Dabo Swinney. However, McKenzie said the environment at Clemson wasn't his favorite, and one deal breaker made him ultimately not commit to the school. Clemson apparently did not have a Chick-fil-a, where McKenzie stated, they had no Chick-fil-a on campus. You had to probably go like 15 minutes off campus to go to a real restaurant. Now to McKenzie's credit, he did have a point that Clemson didn't have one on campus at the time in 2012. Clemson must have heard this story because they now have 2 on-campus locations. But to think there wasn't any nearby was crazy, because just 9 minutes from campus, there's a Chick-fil-A that opened in 2009, so not sure how he missed that and where he could have easily swung by and got some if he wanted while attending Clemson. So somehow the lack of nearby chicken sandwiches stopped Casanova from going to the university. He instead opted for home state Auburn for his college career. What makes this story reach the next level is that game 1 of the 2012 season was Auburn vs. Clemson in the guess what kickoff game? The Chick-fil-A kickoff game. That's right, Chick-fil-A was very involved in football in 2012. Clemson would end up winning the game 26-19, and what made it even more funny is that Clemson went on to win the Chick-fil-A Bowl against LSU at the end of the season. So not only did McKenzie miss out on Chick-fil-A near Clemson University, but he also missed out on winning 2 games sponsored by Chick-fil-A. Honestly, if it was Taco Bell, I would understand McKenzie's position. Another story that involves food comes in the same year, 2012, heading into 2013. At the time, Bob Davie was entering his 2nd season coaching New Mexico Lobos football after going 4-9 in year 1. Meanwhile, there was a lightly recruited 3-star running back out of El Paso named Aaron Jones. Yeah, that Aaron Jones. New Mexico was actually one of the schools highest on his list, and Jones was reportedly very close to committing there. But hometown school University of Texas El Paso was still in the mix, so Davie and his staff had some recruiting work left to do. There was just one problem. Davie and his staff just never showed up. According to the story, the Jones family had prepared an entire meal for the coaches, only to get completely ghosted. Even phone calls made to Davie reportedly went unanswered, and the experience left a terrible impression on Aaron Jones. So instead of committing to New Mexico, Jones chose UTEP. And somehow, this story gets even better, because Jones's very first college game as a freshman at UTEP happened to be against New Mexico and Bob Davie, where Aaron Jones went absolutely off. As the true freshman starting running back, he ran for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns in his college debut to immediately make New Mexico regret the recruiting mistake. Even though UTEP lost the game, Jones definitely made his point. But then in 2014, he somehow got even more revenge. Opening the season against New Mexico again, Jones exploded for 237 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns in a 31-24 UTEP win. Turning down a home-cooked meal is crazy, but for that to lead to 350 yards and 5 touchdowns is just bonkers. There was always one coach at the center of the wildest recruiting stories in college football history, and that was Jim Harbaugh at University of Michigan. Whether it was him having sleepovers at recruits' houses, climbing a tree to prove a point to a recruit, or jumping in a pool because of a recruit, which somehow were all true. He was a man of recruiting in different ways, I'll say. But his wildest story is one that involves something simple as shoes. Football cleats to be exact. It was 2017 where Harbaugh and his staff went to visit 5-star offensive lineman Isaiah Wilson's home. Now normally, taking off your shoes before entering someone's house is just basic respect. And you'd especially think Harbaugh, a guy who seems old school about everything, would understand that. But apparently this time in the Wilson household, he just did not do that. According to the story, Harbaugh was still very excited about the new Jordan Brand partnership that Michigan had, just kept his cleats on and refused to take them off before going in the house. And to make things worse, Wilson's mom had just installed brand new hardwood floors. So yeah, football cleats walking across fresh hardwood, not exactly a winning recruiting pitch. Wilson even said on the Bussing with the Boys podcast,
"He's just walking around with cleats, bro."
He just had no respect. Came in, thought it was cool.
We looked, and I was like, "Oh man."
Your mom didn't snatch him up out of the shoes like.
My mom was 38 hot. She was like, "Why the man take off his shoes?"
And he meant it, as just 8 days later after the Harbaugh visit, Wilson committed to Georgia over Michigan. I thought this was just a fake story until I heard Wilson confirm it on the podcast. Just that sound the cleats would have made gives me goosebumps. The fourth story of this video is something I could also see Harbaugh doing, but this time it was Michigan's rival Notre Dame pulling off a crazy stunt. Now to preface, most programs across the country have this event called Junior Day, which is essentially an invite-only day at the school for underclassmen, which is typically held in late winter or early spring. The goal is for the recruits to see what every aspect of college football life would be like at the school, and in January of 2024, Notre Dame made sure of that experience. There was 2 feet of snow on the ground in South Bend that weekend, but Notre Dame decided to have 3 football staff members dress up as, I'll let you guess. If you said leprechauns, congratulations. I'll send you a gold coin, because that's exactly what happened. And barely above freezing temps, 3 staffers, the recruiting director, recruiting analyst, and recruiting associate, went around welcoming recruits who were coming on campus. That was definitely not a normal practice by these staffers, because this seemed to be the first and only time it happened. But Notre Dame may have been onto something, as they did finish with the 12th best recruiting class for 2025. My only criticism was just that one of the staffers had an orange beard on. Could have landed more recruits if all 3 did it. This last story involves one thing we all hated when we were growing up: school. Usually when you hear about recruits not qualifying academically, it's because they weren't good enough students. But what if I told you a recruit actually tried to ruin his grades on purpose? That was 4-star D lineman Devonta Lampkin. Back in 2015, Lampkin signed a letter of intent to the University of Texas. However, this is where things went south. Lampkin apparently started having second thoughts about wanting to go to Texas, and towards the end of his senior year, he decided he'd rather go to Oklahoma instead. Now Oklahoma and Texas had different academic requirements, and this got Lampkin thinking. He had a Spanish class during the last semester of high school that he decided to tank, hoping that doing bad in the class would lead to his letter of intent becoming voided by the NCAA. That did not happen, so he was left with a bad grade and still going to Texas. During the summer, there were reports saying he could have taken a class in the summer to qualify to go to Texas, but Lampkin did not take it, so he really just wanted to go to OU. A couple months after graduation on July 27th, an appeal Lampkin sent in earlier to get out of his LOI was denied, so he was still a Longhorn. 2 months later in September though, Lampkin announced that he was fully released from his LOI and enrolled at Oklahoma. No bueno for Texas, but bueno for Oklahoma at the time. These were just some of the most odd recruiting stories to ever happen, from Chick-fil-A to Leprechauns and ghosting before it was even called that. Recruiting before NIL was chaotic. Will we hear more wild stories in the future? I sure hope so, but as of now, I don't think coaches and players will go to these extremes again. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, the subscribe button, and hitting the bell notifications. Thank you.